Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in and really exploring a piece of music tech history it's everywhere. So foundational, you might not even clock how much it defines,
Yeah.
modern recorded sound.
Absolutely. We're talking about the lineage of probably the most famous modulation pedal ever created.
Yeah.
The Boss SS Chorus Ensemble, CE series.
Exactly.
And it's a great deep dive because the CE line, it's not just like a random bunch of pedals. It's more like a dynasty, isn't it? Spanning almost 50 years now.
50 years, wow.
Yeah, and this series has pretty much always defined what it means to add that dimension, movement, that lushness we just call chorus.
Right.
If you listen to, say, late 70s new wave or 80s pop, even modern indie rock,
Yeah.
and you hear a guitar or maybe a synth, maybe even a bass line that just sounds bigger, wider, deeper than it feels like it should. Chances are you're hearing some CE DNA in there somewhere. It's just baked into the sound of popular music.
So our mission today isn't just to, list the models off. We want to actually walk you through that whole lineage chronologically. Start with the big one, the CE1, and go right up to the CE20 multifunction thing.
And track the sound, yeah. But also the design choices BOS made along the way. And critically, those big shifts in the circuits, that whole analog versus digital thing.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
Huge. And how the line specialized, for guitar, sure, but then for bass, even 5-string bass.
The whole journey just feels like a lesson in how a company tries to balance, tradition with pushing things forward.
Definitely. Okay, let me repack it then. Start right at the beginning. 1976. The legend.
Right. Part 1. Establishing that analog benchmark, CE1, CE2, CE3.
Let's do it.
So the CE1 Chorus Ensemble, 1976. This wasn't just another chorus pedal hitting the market.
No way. It was the first standalone chorus pedal you could buy as, a floor unit.
Right. And BSS wasn't just tweaking an existing stomp box idea. They were actually porting over a circuit from a really famous amp, weren't they?
They were. The CE1 is legendary, partly because it's basically the chorus and vibrato circuit ripped straight out of the Roland JC120 Jazz Chorus amp.
Ah, the Jazz Chorus.
Yeah.
Iconic.
Totally. That amp came out just a bit earlier, 75, I think, and it already set this new standard for clean tones, mainly because of that built-in stereo chorus. So the CE1 just took that engine and put it in its own box.
Making it accessible to anyone, whatever amp they used.
Exactly. And that box defined that spatial, kind of lush ensemble sound. It's right there in the name.
Looking at the thing, though, the architecture, the format, it looks like a tank compared to later BOSS pedals. Why so big? And it needed its own power cord, right?
Yeah, that huge enclosure, the AC power. It was absolutely necessary back then. We're talking pure analog circuitry inside. And those early BBD chips, they needed space and, crucially, stable power.
EBD. Okay, let's break that down.
Right, the bucket brigade device. That's the heart of pretty much all vintage analog delay and modulation effects. Think of it literally like a line of tiny capacitors, buckets. The audio signal gets sampled, that's the water, and then passed down the line of buckets by a clock signal. That's the brigade.
Gotcha. Like passing buckets down a fire line.
Exactly. And by messing with the speed of that clock signal, usually with an LFO, a low-frequency oscillator, you change how long it takes the signal to get to the end. That tiny, constantly changing delay time, that's chorus.
And the warmth people talk about with analog, where does that come from?
That's kind of the beauty of the imperfection. Every time the signal sample jumps from one bucket to the next, you lose a tiny bit of high-frequency detail. Plus, the clock signal itself introduces a very subtle noise floor. It's not perfectly clean like digital.
So it's dimensional, a bit colored.
Yeah, dimensional, maybe slightly noisy, but in a way that musicians often find really pleasing, really musical. Digital chorus is clean, precise. Analog BBD chorus just has this swirl.
And the CE1's modulation was kind of unique too, wasn't it? Something about the LFO waves.
Yeah, this is a neat detail. It used a triangle wave for the main chorus sound. But then if you switched it over to its dedicated vibrato mode, it used a sine wave instead.
What's the difference in sound between a triangle and a sine wave for modulation?
Well, a triangle wave goes up and down linearly, right? Smooth, symmetrical pitch change. Great for chorus because it adds that shimmer without sounding too warbly or seasick.
Okay.
A sine wave is smoother at the top and bottom of its curve, but can actually sound like a more pronounced pitch bend when you apply it to delay time. So for the vibrato mode, which on the CE1 was only the modulated signal, no dry sound mixed in bias S wanted that definite pitch wobble. The sine wave gave it that almost like a rotary speaker vibe.
Ah, so it had true vibrato, not just chorus set to max.
Exactly. That dual mode thing, driven by different LFOs, gave it a versatility most later compact pedals just couldn't match.
Plus the I/O mono in, but stereo out. That was pretty revolutionary for a floor pedal back then, right? Giving you that big dimensional stereo image.
Oh, absolutely. Running the dry signal out one side and the wet modulated signal out the other, that stereo spread is what cemented its sound in the late 70s, early 80s. Think about recording that instant width.
And the controls were pretty comprehensive, too.
Yeah, input sensitivity, level, chorus intensity, then separate vibrato depth and rate, plus the foot switches for bypass and switching between chorus and vibrato. It was like a mini console on the floor.
It definitely set the template,
Right.
sonically, functionally, but there were downsides that obviously pushed BioSS towards the next thing.
For sure. It was massive, heavy, AC power only, which was a hassle. And, compared to later stuff, it definitely had a higher noise floor. Partly the circuit complexity, partly just the nature of those early BBDs and clock circuits.
Oh, a masterpiece, but kind of an unwieldy one, maybe more suited for the studio or a fixed stage rig.
Precisely.
Right.
Which leads us directly to its much, much smaller sibling.
A CE2, 1979. The compact revolution begins.
Yeah, the CE2 was Balas basically saying, okay, the CE1 sounds amazing, but musicians need something practical. Touring musicians, guys playing clubs, they needed something that fit on a pedal board and ran off a battery.
So the engineering challenge must have been pretty huge.
Yeah.
Cramming that CE1 magic into this standard Bar S compact box.
Enormous. And they had to make some serious sacrifices to do it.
The big one being stereo, right?
Yeah.
They went mono only.
Yeah.
That seems like a massive step back, losing the CE1's killer feature.
It was a huge trade-off, yeah. But you have to remember the context. For most guitarists in '79, just having chorus in a small battery-powered stomp box was the main thing. The market was screaming for compact pedals.
Practicality won out.
It did, so they stripped it down. Just rate and depth knobs, mono in, mono out, no separate vibrato mode, all sacrificed to fit the board, run on 9 volts.
Speaking of 9 volts, didn't the early CE2s use that weird ACA power adapter? That's a potential pitfall for vintage buyers, isn't it?
Oh yeah, the ACA thing. Good point. Early Bauhaus compacts used the ACO standard. It was
Right.
center positive, usually 12 volts, unregulated.
Which is the opposite of modern power supplies.
Right. Inside the pedal, there was circuitry designed to take that 12V and filter it down to the 9V the circuit needed, sometimes even less for the BBD chip. Worked fine with the right ACA adapter or a battery. But if you plugged a modern standard 9V center negative supply, like the PSA type, into an ACA pedal.
You wouldn't work properly or sound weird.
Exactly. It wouldn't get the voltage it expected for that internal filtering stage, so it would often sound starved, noisy, or just not work at all. You either need the right adapter, a daisy chain setup that handles the voltage drop, or a mod. It catches people out.
Okay, so technically complex, even in its simplicity. But the sound, still analog BBD, right? Often that famous MN3000 DIL7 chip in the early ones.
Yes, and that's key. That MN3007 chip, combined with how BOS voiced the circuit around it, gave the CE2 that sound. Lush, but somehow tighter than the CE1. Definitely known for being warm, really musical modulation.
Warmer or maybe darker than later BBDs.
Often, yeah. That's the perception. The MN3007 just had this character. And that voicing became the sound of BOSS chorus. It's probably one of the most recorded chorus sounds in history.
Why do you think it hit so hard?
It just struck a perfect balance, didn't it? Complex enough to add real dimension and richness, but so simple to use just 2 knobs. You could dial in a great sound instantly. Think The Cure, The Police, those clean, textured rhythm sounds that's often a CE2.
So the mono workhorse. But people still miss the stereo.
They did, which inevitably led to the next step, bringing stereo back to the compact format. Enter the CE3 starting around 1982.
Right, the successor, bridging the gap, still compact, still analog BBD,
Yeah.
though now we're often talking about a different chip, the MN3207.
Yeah, the MN3207 is commonly associated with the CE3. And the big news was mono input, but dual outputs. Stereo was back on the menu for compact users.
And they added that mode switch. What did that actually do? It wasn't just splitting the signal, was it?
No, it was cleverer than that. You still had rate and depth, but the mode switch gave you options. Mode I was typically the classic setup. Dry out of output A, wet chorus out of output B, maximum stereo width.
Like the CE1's stereo out.
Exactly. But the other mode, often mode 2, did something different. It kept the dry signal in both outputs, but sent the wet chorus signal out of phase between A and B.
Out of phase, what does that achieve?
When those two signals combine, especially if your amps aren't panned super wide, it creates this really deep, almost three-dimensional swirling effect. It gives you a sense of depth and movement that's also quite mono-compatible, which can be useful. It wasn't just about width, it was about adding this complex internal movement.
Okay, so more versatile for different setups.
Yeah.
But sonically, people often say the CE3 sounds different from the CE2. Brighter, maybe sharper. Why would that be if both are analog BBD?
That perceived difference often gets pinned on that chip change, from the CE2's MN3007 to the CE3's MN3207. The MN3207 was a newer design, intended for lower voltage operation, maybe a bit higher fidelity, cleaner.
Cleaner equals brighter.
Often, yeah. It might have slightly leaner low mids compared to the CE2. Some players feel it lost a tiny bit of that thick, syrupy warmth of the CE2. But the flip side is that slightly brighter, perhaps more articulate voice really excelled in stereo.
How so?
It sparkled beautifully when you pan the outputs wide, perfect for those clean, arpeggiated parts or funk rhythms where you want the effect to cut through the mix without muddying up the low mids where the bass and kick drum live.
So CE2, warm, classic mono. CE3, brighter, stereo-focused, maybe a bit more surgical, definitely paving the way for more specialized sounds to come.
Exactly, and that leads us right into the next phase where specialization really takes over.
Part 2. Specialization and the digital crossover. We're talking CE2B for bass, the pivotal CE5, and then the CEB3, another bass one.
Right. The late 80s, early 90s, the effects market is booming, and BAU SS starts tailoring the CE sound.
First up, the CE2B from 87, clearly aimed at bass players. Why did bassists need their own chorus?
Well, bassists were using effects more, but standard guitar chorus circuits often just don't work well on bass. The modulation, especially on the lower notes, it can make everything sound muddy, indistinct. It can kind of rob the bass of its fundamental punch.
Yeah, that low-end warble is killer for the rhythm section.
Totally. So the CE2B was essentially a CE2 circuit, but voiced differently, tuned to be less aggressive on the low frequencies, trying to keep that fundamental solid.
But the really key addition was that third knob, wasn't it?
Absolutely crucial. The effect level control. A mix knob. This was huge for bassists. It let you blend the amount of chorus signal, the wet, with your original clean bass tone, the dry.
So you could get the shimmer on top, but keep the solid low end underneath.
Precisely. Dial in just enough effect to add movement or width, maybe for sustained notes or chords on bass, without sacrificing that essential punch and clarity that anchors the band.
Makes total sense for bass.
They go.
Guitarists started grabbing them too, didn't they?
They did, because they realized, hey, this is basically a CE2, but with a mix control. If you wanted the CE2 sound, but found it sometimes washed out your core tone a bit too much in a busy mix.
You could just dial back the effect level knob on the CE2B a touch.
Exactly. Maybe run it 70% or 80% wet. It gave guitarists that extra degree of control the original CE2 lacked, kind of a secret weapon for subtle chorus.
So great for bass, useful for guitarists wanting a blend, still mono only though, like the CE2, and maybe voiced a bit less sparkly than the CE3 or the next one up.
Right. Warmth and low mid definition were the priorities for the bass version, not so much high-end shimmer. Which brings us to 1991 and a pedal that really changed the game, the CE5.
Ah, the CE5. Still in production today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Often called the Studio Engineer's CE. Why that nickname?
Because it introduced maximum flexibility, especially in tone shaping. It kept the level rate and depth knobs, but the big innovation was the filter section.
Not just a simple tone knob.
No, a dual filter system, independent high-cut and low-cut filters. This was totally new for a compact chorus. It gave you surgical control over which frequencies the chorus effect actually hit.
So you could really tailor the sound, make it dark like a CE2 or bright and modern.
Exactly. Roll off the highs with the high cut, roll off the lows with the low cut. You could mimic older voicings, or, crucially for mixing, you could use the low-cut filter to keep the chorus completely off your lower guitar strings. Let them ring out clean and punchy while only the higher strings shimmered.
Ah, so keeping the mud out of the bass and kick drum range in a mix. That is an engineer's dream.
Totally. It transformed the chorus from just a general wash into a really precise tool.
That alone makes it a huge step. But the CE5 is also where the big internal change happens. The whole analog versus digital thing really comes to a head here, doesn't it?
This is where it gets interesting and maybe confusing for buyers. For roughly the first 10 years, 91 to about October 2001, the CE5 was analog. It carried on that BBD lineage using chips like the MN3207 or similar ones.
Okay, so far so good. Still analog.
But then around late 2001, BOSS quietly transitioned the CE5 circuit over to digital signal processing, DSP.
Wait, seriously. Same pedal name, same knobs on the outside, but a completely different engine inside.
Yep, fundamentally different. They likely did it for consistency, lower noise floor, maybe cost and parts availability. Digital chips solve a lot of analog problems.
But how did it sound? Did players notice?
Oh, the tone purists definitely notice. The digital versions are crystal clear, dead quiet, very reliable. But many players felt they lacked that certain something, that dimensionality, the slight randomness, the warmth, the character of the BBD chips.
The analog mojo.
Pretty much. As a result, those pre-2001 analog CE5s are now highly sought after by collectors. You have to check serial numbers or sometimes the LED color to know which version you're getting.
Wow, so the CE5 isn't just one pedal, it's two pedals in the same box, depending on when it was made. It bridged the gap from analog to digital within its own production run.
Exactly. It represents that critical fracture point in the lineage. Analog legacy on one side, digital consistency on the other. Huge significance.
Okay, let's quickly cover the other specialized pedal from this era, the CEB3 bass chorus from 1995. How did this differ from the earlier CE2B?
The CEB3 was a much more sophisticated approach to bass chorus than just adding a mix knob. It was designed specifically to address the low-frequency clarity issue in a more advanced way.
Ow.
Its defining feature is a split-frequency crossover design. This is way beyond just blending wet and dry.
Okay, crossover. What does that mean in this context?
It means the pedal internally splits the bass signal into two frequency bands. The low filter knob doesn't just cut lows from the effect, it actually sets the point where that split happens.
Okay. So you set a frequency.
Right, let's say you set it at 100 hertz. Everything below 100 hertz bypasses the chorus effect completely. It stays 100% dry, solid, punchy, fundamental. Only the frequencies above 100 hertz actually get sent to the core circuit to be modulated.
That's brilliant for bass, especially extended range basses.
Absolutely essential for 5 or 6 string players. You need that low B string around 30 hertz to be rock solid. The CEB3 ensures the chorus only adds shimmer and movement to the mids and highs, leaving the foundation completely untouched.
So it's engineered for maximum clarity in the mix. Protects the low end perfectly.
Exactly. Perfect for modern pop, rock, funk, anywhere you need that bass to be clear and powerful, but maybe want a little harmonic richness on top.
The trade-off, maybe, is that it sounds very precise, very clean, because of that design. Not as warm or washy as the older CE2B, perhaps.
That's probably fair. It's less about a syrupy vintage wash and more about surgically adding chorus where it works best for bass without compromising the low end. Precision is the goal.
Got it. Okay, that covers the specialization and the digital shift. Now let's move into the modern era, where BISS seems to be looking both backwards and forwards.
Right. Part 3, tributes and workstations. We're talking the CE2W Wazacraft and the CE20.
First, the CE2W Wazacraft from 2016. What's the deal with the Wazacraft line?
Wazacraft is BOSS, basically flexing its muscles, showing respect for its own legacy. Waza means art and technique in Japanese. These pedals are made in Japan, often revisiting classic, iconic circuits, but rebuilding them with premium components, modern refinements, lower noise, kind of the best of both worlds.
And the CE2W is clearly an homage to the early analog CEs, right? It looks like a CE2.
It is. It's an all-analog pedal using BBDs, designed to capture the magic of the originals, but in one box and with improvements. It's buoyant because it basically houses the most sought-after vintage CE voices.
Which one specifically?
It has a mode switch. In standard mode, it's designed to be the definitive CE2 sound, that warm, lush mono chorus.
So wait, didn't you say the original CE2 was mono only?
It was, but here's the Waza refinement. The CE2W's standard mode adds stereo output capability. So you get the CE2 voicing, but with the stereo spread, the original lacked.
Nice. Best of both worlds there. What about the other mode?
Flip the switch to CE1 mode, and it aims to replicate the original 1976 Legend. You get both the wide stereo chorus and that unique sine wave vibrato circuit from the CE1.
Wow, so it's got the CE2 and the CE1 sounds covered. Any other refinements compared to the originals?
Yes, a couple of key ones. Remember how the original CE1's vibrato depth was fixed? The CE2W's CE1 mode adds variable depth control for the vibrato, which is a big improvement in usability.
Oh, that's handy.
And critically, the noise floor is significantly lower than the vintage units. They use modern BBDs, better filtering, careful circuit layout, all while keeping the core analog signal path intact.
So for someone who loves those vintage analog CE sounds, the CE2 warmth, the CE1's big stereo and vibrato, but wants modern reliability, lower noise, stereo output, and a compact size, the CE2W is pretty much the answer.
It's arguably the definitive modern analog CE reference box, celebrates the legacy beautifully.
Okay, so that's the loving analog tribute. Now let's swing completely the other way to the digital realm with the CE20 chorus ensemble. This one's discontinued now, right?
Yeah, it ran from about 2005 to 2011. It was part of Boss's larger twin pedal series, bigger footprint, more controls. And if the CE2W was about perfecting analog history, the CE20 was the all-in-one digital chorus workstation.
Purely digital multi-algorithm.
Yeah.
Meaning it wasn't trying to be a BBD circuit. It was using processing power to model different sounds.
Exactly. Focused on breadth, flexibility, programmability, stuff that digital does really well.
So what kind of sounds did it model? Did it do the CE1?
It did. It had a CE1 model, but crucially, it also modeled the legendary Roland SDD320 Dimension D.
Ooh, the Dimension D. That's a different beast entirely, isn't it? More subtle.
Totally different. The Dimension D is a famous studio rack unit, highly prized. It creates width and depth using more complex phase manipulation and multiple delay lines rather than the obvious pitch modulation of a BBD chorus. It's often described as more spacious, less effecty, just makes things sound bigger.
So the CE20 having both the CE1 and the Dimension D models, it's pretty significant, covers a lot of ground.
Huge. Plus, it had dedicated modes optimized for bass and acoustic guitar. 6 modes in total, massive versatility.
And being digital, I assume it had more controls than the compact pedals.
Way more. Beyond rate and depth, you had parameters like brilliance to control the high-frequency content of the effect, and ambience to add a sort of reverb-like space. Really detailed tweaking available.
Plus presets, right. That's a big advantage of digital for live use.
Yep. Stored 4 user presets. You could dial in your CE1 sound, your Dimension D sound, maybe a bass sound, and recall them instantly with your foot. Super practical for stage work.
So the ultimate flexible chorus box for its time. The trade-offs being the larger size, the digital architecture, maybe not the same feel as the analog units for some players.
That's the usual debate. Incredible flexibility and clean operation versus that arguably more organic dimensional feel of the analog BBD circuits. And of course, it's discontinued, so you'd be looking on the used market.
Okay, that brings us pretty much up to date. Let's try and synthesize all this. Part 4. Key takeaways.
Yeah, looking back at the whole timeline, you really see BOSS responding to needs, solving problems step by step.
It's like they started with the big statement piece, the CE1, defining the sound.
But realized immediately, okay, this is too big, too power hungry. So boom, CE2 solves the format problem, even if it meant losing stereo for a bit.
Then the CE3 brings stereo back to the compact world.
Then the CE5 adds that crucial studio-level filtering control.
While the CE2B and CEB3 tackle the specific needs of bass players, getting progressively smarter about preserving the low end.
Then the CE2W looks back and says, let's perfect those original analog sounds with modern tech.
And the CE20 looked forward, embracing digital to offer maximum variety and programmability. It's a really clear evolutionary path.
It is. You can map it. CE1 established the BBD stereo chorus vibrato. CE2 made it compact mono. CE3 restored compact stereo. CE5 added filters. CE2B, CEB3 specialized for bass, blend crossover. CE2W unified the analog legends. CE20 went wide with digital modeling.
And let's nail down that analog versus digital divide one more time, because it's probably the most important distinction for anyone buying one of these.
Okay, simple breakdown. CE1, CE2, CE2B, CE3, all definitely analog BBD.
Right.
CE5 is the tricky one. Analog from 91 to about late 2001, digital after that. Need to check.
Got it.
CEB3, primarily known for its crossover function, likely exists in both analog and digital forms depending on era, but the function is key. CE2W, modern, pure analog Wazacraft. CE20, fully digital workstation.
That split, especially around the CE5, really shows the tension, doesn't it, between the desirable character of the old tech and the clean convenience of the new.
Totally. And the fact that the CE2W exists and that vintage analog CEs command high prices proves that even with perfect digital modeling available, that BBD sound, its warmth, its dimension, maybe even its slight flaws, still holds a special appeal for a lot of musicians.
Okay, so for you listening, trying to figure out which CE might be right for you, let's do a quick use case guide based on everything we've discussed.
Sounds good. So if you want that classic, thick, kind of dark vintage chorus shimmer and you're mostly playing mono, the CE2 is your icon, especially the early ones with the MN3007 chip, if you can find one.
If you need that classic stereo swirl, but in a compact pedal, the CE3 is a solid choice, maybe a touch brighter. Or, for the best of both worlds, CE2 warmth plus modern stereo, the CE2W in standard mode is the top contender today.
Need surgical control in the studio or a dense live mix? That points towards the CE5 specifically for those high and low cut filters. Make sure you know if you're getting analog or digital if that matters to you.
And for bass players, if you want simple warmth with a blend control, the CECB is great. But for modern clarity, especially with 5+ string basses, the CEB3's crossover design is pretty much indispensable for protecting those low notes.
And finally, if you just want maximum versatility, loads of different chorus and modulation flavors, including that Dimension D sound, plus presets for live use. The digital CE20, if you can find one used, was built for that job.
What a journey. From that massive AC-powered box in '76 to digital workstations and meticulous analog recreations decades later, the CE line really did invent the standalone chorus, didn't it? And then just kept refining it.
Yeah, constantly balancing that original ensemble sound tradition with whatever the next innovation was. Smaller size, stereo, filters, digital. It's a masterclass in staying relevant while respecting your roots.
It's cool how even when they went digital with the CE20, they still included models of their own classics like the CE1.
Yeah.
They always acknowledged that original blueprint.
They did. Okay, so here's something maybe I'll leave you thinking about.
Yeah.
Considering how clean, quiet, and flexible digital modeling got, like in the CE20, why do you think that old analog DBD sound, the sound of the CE1 and CE2, still has such a grip on players? Why pay premium prices for pedals that are technically noisier and less precise? Is it just nostalgia? Or is there something about the limitations of that analog tech? The slight imperfections, the way the clock noise interacts, the less than perfect filtering that actually adds to the musicality. Does that inherent analogness create a kind of dimensional swirl that perfect digital code struggles to replicate convincingly?
Is the magic partly in the flaws? That's a good one. Does digital precision sometimes feel sterile by comparison?
Something to ponder, maybe next time you hear that unmistakable chorus shimmer on a track or when you're plugging in your own modulation pedals.
Definitely food for thought. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Catch you next time.